1. I urgently need advice on how to protect myself against a very aggressive neighbour. I'm the mother of 2 young daughters, one is now 6, the other 5, and we live on the ground floor of an apartment building. Our neighbour on the 2nd floor, around 35 to 40 years old, and his girlfriend make our lives hell. It all started with little things. The neighbour and his girlfriend often threw things over the balcony, which landed in our garden. His girlfriend rang the doorbell several times a day to ask if she could collect her fallen things from our garden. In doing so, she often woke up my children, who were taking a nap at the time. I politely asked them to pay more attention to their things. Then it got worse and worse. As soon as we sat in the garden, they deliberately shook things over our heads. At the children's birthday parties, always on a Friday or Saturday between 3 and 7 p.m., the neighbour constantly came out onto the balcony, shouted loudly, opened and closed the windows violently, and watched us. Once we were grilling in the garden with an electric grill with the landlord's permission, he called the police. It also became very threatening. The neighbour shouted at me several times and called me a freak, and once he threatened me directly. "Celebrate your birthday one more time and you'll see what happens, little girl." He spat behind us, but he didn't hit us. I'm now very afraid to go outside, especially with my children, and the worst scenarios are buzzing around in my head. It also happens that the 2 of them throw water, oil, or other liquids out of the window, which then land on my windowsill and dirty my windows. I can no longer open windows because that liquid they keep spilling outside keeps getting in my apartment if I let it open. To make matters worse, they also put garbage in our mailbox and threw it in the washing machine several times. Recently, there was a big argument between the 2 of them, and I called the police out of fear because it sounded like he was throwing furniture around the apartment and hitting her. When I told the police what I heard, they reacted immediately and calmly confronted him. I was living in a family where domestic violence was normal. I kept getting flashbacks every time I hear him screaming like that and hitting stuff around. When the police left, he came out and shouted, "I will F the person who called the police." Since then, he has even followed me into the laundry room, and I no longer feel safe there. I always have my cell phone ready so that I can quickly call the police in an emergency. They have also damaged or soiled our laundry several times, so that I have had to throw some of it away. I am very unsettled and afraid of how the situation will continue. I have asked my landlord several times to do something. I am registered with the Tenants Protection Association and have asked for help. My lawyer has written a letter to the landlord asking him to reduce our rent because the quality of life is not good. I would like to know what else I can do to protect myself and my children. I have to be honest, we cannot move. That is out of the question for financial reasons. What else can I do legally? Has anyone had similar experiences? How can I protect myself from this in the long term? Can the neighbours perhaps be given a notice of termination? I would be very grateful for any advice. I want to add that they do not have problems only with us. We live in a 6-apartment building, and they have problems with almost every single neighbour except one. He even almost hit an older neighbour. If we hadn't come out in that moment, who knows what would have happened. He held a closed fist in front of the older neighbour's face and was mumbling something. He left right as he saw us. My mother was with me at the time, and she had seen him for the first time that day, and was shook from the situation. Hellfreezer's note, I think the best solution here is if all your neighbours rally about the situation. If everybody's making complaints to the landlord, not necessarily asking for a rent reduction, but certainly letting them know how volatile and unpleasant the building is to live in, then the landlord might be willing to kick them out. If it happens often enough from multiple people, they'd be more likely to do something because landlords don't want to deal with things like this and they will take the path of least resistance. So if kicking them out is the easiest thing in the long run, that's likely what they'll do. And I did see from the comments on Reddit that you are in Germany, therefore you can't put a camera on your outside door, you can't carry like pepper spray or anything like this, but there are other sprays you could possibly carry. You can get deodorant in small like lady-sized deodorant, get them in small tubes, small cans. It's an option. Regarding the recording again, though, I did just look it up, and as, of course, you said, it is illegal unless the speaker addresses the public. So if he's shouting and making threats to people in a public space, just in general, like when he said he was going to F whoever called the police, I'd call that addressing the public. You could also, from what I'm understanding, as Ring doorbells are legal in Germany, providing you follow certain rules. For example, if you got permission from all your neighbours, and this man doesn't sound like a smart man, saying you were installing this new Ring doorbell, would they be okay with that? And if he says yes, then you can record any antagonistic behaviour he takes about you in the area. Might be worth looking into. 2. My mother-in-law has a house beside her that was bought by someone as an investment. The person started renting it out and didn't want to spend a dime on it because it would eventually be knocked down. Inside was horrendous, outside was okay. Renter moves in, Delbert. He runs a moving company, so he has multiple commercial trucks stored there. Not permitted by my city, but minor issue, so no complaints made. Then he decides to open up an after-hours club at the house. Runs from about 2 to 6 a.m. on the weekend. Buy a ticket to get in and for booze. Drunk people out on there and my mother-in-law's lawn early in the morning. Line-up of cars, large car shows up at about 4 a.m. and loads garbage bags into the trunk, assuming money. Garbage everywhere. Whole neighborhood is angry. Multiple complaints to police. Every second weekend, the police are there for noise complaints, rounding up drunks or breaking up fights. Mother-in-law is scared to have any involvement as she is a senior and doesn't know what will happen if she starts complaining. It is turning into some real shady shenanigans next door. I offer security cameras come by in the evening, and she says no. One morning, a fight in the front yard turns into a guy pulling out a gun. A few rounds are fired. One buries itself into the side of my mother-in-law's house, right by the window of the suite where my mother-in-law is sleeping. Shooter is long gone by the time the police arrive, and everyone says it was some random guy who just showed up. Starting the next day, I'm on the phone to everyone. This has been going on for about a year, and I decide to ignore my mother-in-law and get involved. By law, police don't talk to the city, so they have no reports on file. They will start looking into it. Bylaw shuts down by 6, so you will need to call the police if it occurs again. Police. We have a file on the house and are monitoring it. I tell them it will take someone to get killed to do something. Response is, we are monitoring it. Liquor Control Board. They will shut down a licensed establishment if they serve a minor or even sell booze that didn't pass through them. After-hours clubs are not licensed by them, so they will not get involved. City Councillor. I will look into what I can do. Tell her someone is going to die if this keeps happening. One night someone shows up and knifes someone and kills them. Delbert tries to intervene, and the same person decides to see how many attempts it takes to put Delbert's face through a wall. Tip, it takes more than 3. Again, guy is gone by the time police show up. Half the neighborhood is behind police tape for several days as police do a murder investigation. People had to park down the block and walk to their houses. Delbert is in the hospital for at least a month as they rebuild his face. City and police now tell the owner the place is condemned under a nuisance law. Gets sold and is demolished. Delbert gets back on his feet and ends up renting again a few blocks from me. Moving trucks are back, but this time he decides to start buying junked cars and storing them on the property. A call to bylaw this time gets action as they now have zero tolerance for him. He is gone within a few months. Still around somewhere, as I know where he now stores his trucks. 3. I lived peacefully in my ground floor apartment for just over a year, and had just re-signed my year-long lease when a family of 3 moved into the one-bedroom unit above me. I knew off the bat they would be buttheads. They renovated their kitchen prior to moving in, and worked until midnight against city ordinance, which I kindly reminded them. When they moved in after several weeks, I found out the husband was incredibly heavy-footed, and they let their toddler run laps through the kitchen, shrieking at the top of her lungs all day. My lights shake. I even had art fall off my walls. I took a video and shot it to the HOA manager and my landlord. My HOA manager is already not a fan of mine. He's an older gentleman who once knocked on my door and yelled at me for my doormat, gifted by my boyfriend, that said, "Hello, mother effer, hey, hi, how you doing?" Mind you, no kids lived in my building at the time. I was angrily told that I had to remove the mat. I told him that it was no problem. and as I picked it up, I explained that it was a funny gift I received from my boyfriend. He got on my face about how it's not funny, and he hoped my boyfriend didn't speak to me like that, it's foul, etc. I heard him talking crap about me to my neighbor across the hall. I didn't care, I moved on with my life. Fast forward a few months. I sent him the video of my lights shaking and flickering from the stomping and running above me. The HOA manager told me, a woman living alone, that I needed to knock on their door and nicely ask them to keep it down. It gave me some reserve, but up I went. I welcomed them to the neighborhood, told them their gremlin was cute, and began the plea that they be mindful that I lived below them. I was super nice, showed them the video explaining how loud it was for me, and just asked them to be mindful of the noise. To their credit, it got better. For about a week. It's now been 7 months, and I fear we are in an all-out passive-aggressive war. Their kid is running suicides, and I'm banging on the walls. They get up and stomp around at 5 a.m. I blare my television at 12 a.m. They vacuum at 7 a.m. I vacuum the roof at 2 a.m. The HOA manager refuses to get involved because they're a nice family with a child. And I suppose I'm just a hussy of a single woman living alone. I would just move out, but the rent is incredibly cheap for the area, and before they moved in, I genuinely loved living here. My lease is up in March. Do I let them run me out of maybe the last affordable apartment in the area, or do I move and pay for my peace? Further info. I live alone. I work from the home some days, and the noise makes it difficult. The husband also works from home, and mom doesn't work, so they're around all the time. The HOA doesn't have any fines in place for noise. Hellfreezer's note, your first mistake was moving into a place with an HOA, but that's done, nothing we can do about it now. So, the next thing you need to do is you need to run for your HOA. You need to get on that board. It's very, very important that you do. Once you're on the board, you can learn the ins and outs of how it works, and then you can start getting things done to your own satisfaction. Although it also wouldn't hurt for you to look for other places just to see what's out there. You might be lucky enough to find a place, a small house or something somewhere. I say that not knowing what the costs are like in your area. I'm aware they could be very well extortionate. I mean, housing prices where I live in Scotland, actually quite reasonable for the most part. And I know in many places in the US, they are ridiculous. Also, if you don't like the grumpy old man of an HOA head, odds are other people don't like him either, so it might be worth it running against him. And the last bit of advice I have to give to you, this isn't going to make you happy, but it is the smart thing to do going forward. Stop retaliating. I know it feels good in the moment, but at this point, you're just being mutually aggressive, and that doesn't make you look good. So if you do have to bring this up publicly, you don't want to look like the bad guy, especially if they perhaps start recording the noise you're making, which they could do. So, don't retaliate. Play the long game, get a vengeance that's going to stick. 4. Hello, comrades. I used to live in different countries. Not in all around the world, of course, but enough for forming my own opinions based on my own experience. I would like to discuss the neighbor's noise issue from an international perspective. First story, one in ex-Soviet country around 2016, a one-bedroom flat, nighttime noise. The upstairs neighbor was, or maybe is, a corpulent Karen lady, unknown age, who got home after 10 p.m. It would be about 1 a.m. or even closer to 3 around there. I had to get up at 6:30 in the morning, so I went to bed around 10 p.m. And she started stomping around, very loudly, moving furniture, dropping things on the floor, inviting friends over, and once she got a dog, it was a damn nightmare, literally for several years. First of all, me and my downstairs neighbor, who thought that it was me who was the source of the noise, we went to the door of this woman's flat and asked her to knock it off. But instead of saying, sorry, I did not realize, she said something like, it's a poor quality building, it's not my problem, goodbye, and closed the door. I thought, well, you want a war? We'll get it. Give you a war you never believe. I deeply read all the local laws about it and tried to solve it legally. According to the laws, the official silent time was between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. I called the police, recorded everything, Wrote to officials in all possible government departments. Got nothing, police didn't care. The last step was an official court appearance, which would take a couple of years. And I suddenly found a local forum where people were discussing the same problems and recommending leveraging some tech stuff. And that opened up a whole new world to me. A world of devices that were developed purposely for punishing neighbors. I couldn't even imagine that it existed. On Play Markets, I found and ordered vibro speakers, 30 watts, a Hummer machine, and water pipes as a containment. The fact that I found these items on an international platform like Alibaba says that the problem is international. I mean, sure, I could just kick her butt and go to jail because that's illegal, or I could tiptoe on the edge of the law without breaking it. So I installed vibro speakers, took a drill, configured my Wi-Fi as a jammer for her SSD. How I did it, that's another story. And according to the law, every day I attacked her, it started at 8 and finished at 10 p.m. I collected a lot of sound samples, controlled it remotely throughout the day, and didn't give her an opportunity to sleep. After this justified countercharge, I started dog training sessions. Every night, when she made any kind of noise, I turned on the vibro sound system at 8. I didn't turn on when it was a silent night. Thus, I trained her as a dog, and it helped. It really helped. I noticed that she started to not slam the door, tried to not stomp, etc. I kept this approach for several months, and success! I won. Story 1.2. The same country, daytime, poor quality flat, 2 bedrooms, children making noise. In this case, despite the fact that the quality of the flat was quite bad, everyone could live in peace if it wasn't for the noise. But one upstairs, again, family of elders and their grandchildren, allowed them to run across the flat. We and their upstairs neighbors suffered for that. According to the law, it was legal, but I told them that we can play this game too, and I installed the sound system as well. Again, it helped. But the fight took a bit longer. Again, plebs understand. Only strike back. Only force. Story 2. Another ex-Soviet republic. 2022. Multi-floor building, side neighbors, 2 bedrooms. I didn't know local laws well. They turn on music at night and day randomly. The only thing I could do is call the landlord and ask them to solve it. But he wasn't interested. Just visited them once and started shouting at each other in the local language, and they started turning the music on less often. 3. UK. Sometime in 2020, I lived in a semi-detached house, and despite the one line saying no parties in the rules, one of the tenants turned on music at night. Again, I don't know the laws. Hellfreezer's note, generally speaking, no noise after 11 p.m. except New Year's and Bonfire Night, where it's extended a little bit longer for all the boom-booms. I wasn't sure if I should call the police. I messaged the landlord, and she could only solve the problem the next day. Story 4. Central Asia 2023 multi-floor building, 2 bedrooms, deep evening. Someone turned on a national music very loud. Oh, I could walk 500 miles and I could walk 500 more. I got downstairs and just asked him to turn it off. Guy was good, smiled, said, okay, and turned it off. Just a positive experience. Who knew people like that existed? And you know what? All the time in these problems, when I got neighbors for the first time, informing them that they're loud, ask them to stop it. I'd like to hear your experience from different regions and with different laws. It might be useful for everyone. I'm interested in how these kind of problems are solved in Far Asia or both American continents because I've never lived there. There are also popular rumors like in Germany and Switzerland, where there are real restricted laws and you can't even flush a toilet at night. Yeah, that's far from pooping. Do you use similar tech, stuff like speakers? I'd like to hear how your neighbors got punished. I like to punish. Thanks. 5. So my story took place several years ago. I work in a group home for adults with special needs. The building I work in is just a regular bungalow in a residential area. Parking isn't ideal because all we have is one narrow driveway. So if the driveway is free when you get there, fine. But if someone is already parked there when you arrive, you end up blocking them in if you park in the driveway. This is not ideal as we often leave on errands for the residents during our shift. So when the driveway is occupied, we park on the street in front of the house. This is perfectly legal. I live in Canada in an area that gets a ton of snow in the winter, so the only rules about parking are you can't block a fire hydrant. And from the 15th of October to the 15th of April, you can't park on the street from midnight to 7 a.m. This is to allow for snowplows to do their job in the event of a snowstorm. All other times of day are fair game, and anything in the summer is acceptable. My story took place on a sunny afternoon in late June, so it was perfectly legal for me to park on the street. I'm at work, doing my job. There's a knock at the door. My coworker answered. Turns out it was the guy who lives across the street. He and his wife were heading out of town and were traveling in their truck, which had a trailer hitched to the back. My car was parked on the street across from him, and as he was backing out of his driveway, he backed his trailer right into my front driver's side wheel well. So I go out to inspect the damage, and he's already mad, saying how frustrating it is that people in our house are always parked on the street. Makes it hard for him to get out of his driveway, etc. Mind you, this is the first time he's said anything to any of us, but whatever. I didn't say anything to him, just looked at my car, and since the damage is pretty bad, ended up costing $2,000 to repair, I just say let's exchange insurance information. Literally the only thing I've said to him at this point. He then gets very angry, starts yelling and says he refuses to go through insurance. It's my fault for being parked on the street, and he'll pay for the damages. But only if I take my car to this guy he knows. His wife then adds that they were doing me a favor by even telling me. They could have just driven off. Well, technically yes, but that's actually illegal. So no, you weren't doing me any favors. Again, I don't say much. I just reiterate that I'd like to go through insurance. He flat out refuses, which is also illegal. So I say fine, I'm just going to call the police. At this point, he says he's not sticking around, and he and his wife drive off. I called the cops. The cops arrive, see that I'm parked legally, and say there's no reason he shouldn't have been able to back out without hitting me. Now here's perhaps the most annoying part. They track him down the next day, and come back to let me know they've spoken with him. Turns out he's a retired guard for the local jail, and according to the officer who did the follow-up, he seems like a good guy, quite nice. Well, yes, I'm sure he was nice to the cop. Me, the rather small female civilian, not so much. The cop tries to convince me not to go through insurance. Like what? He's a part of your club, so he gets a free pass to be a dick? No thanks. Dude verbally assaulted me for his mistake. He drove away from the scene of an accident. Fine him. Don't try to make this easier on him. He's a dick. I went through insurance. My insurance covered 100% of the cost, and deemed it not my fault. Which was a relief, as it means my premiums were not affected. I'm pretty sure the cops have to issue a ticket when a motor vehicle collision occurs. So not sure what happened with the neighbor, but I'm guessing he received some sort of fine because I know I didn't. Hellfreezer's note, I see if you can get the name of the cop that came to talk to you and report him to Internal Affairs. They love guys like that. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Naughty Neighbours, episode 22. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and do support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. Okay. No other bits and bobs today, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. Today's question is, are you prepared for snow? I ask this because apparently we have 48 hours of flurries, as they describe them on the way. I'm not sure what we're ultimately in store for this year with the snow, but I don't like it. I don't want to deal with it. We already had a little bit, which thankfully didn't last long. Last week, it was last week. But there is apparently more on the way. So I'm trying to figure out when it's coming, just to make sure I'm well stocked and that I don't have to go out. I have my bike technically repaired now. I was able to reassemble the wheel. Ultimately, I had to take the little cages of bearings that arrived and just crack them open, get the bearings out, put the bearings in themselves and pack them with grease. That seemed to do a better job. So I'll test if that's actually rideable tomorrow. If it is, I will go into my town and I will buy lots of yummy groceries, like chicken stuck up on rice and various other things. As I have noticeably put on weight over the past few weeks, I need to be a healthier health freezer. Yes, I think I'll change the channel name to Health Freezer. I'll start doing fitness videos, get all them gains. But as I'm trying to eat a bit healthier now, hell of a time of year for it. I will still have a nice Christmas dinner. That is my intent. But otherwise, be a bit healthier. Cut out the snacks, at least as frequently as I have been indulging. There was really no need for that. I had a point there. Oh yeah, I'll have to buy healthier foods. Okay, and with that, was there a question? Oh yeah, are you prepared for the snow? There we go. Sorry. Speaking of food, I haven't actually eaten dinner today. I'm going to have to go do that when I'm done recording. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. Today's answer comes from Naughty Neighbours number 20, and I think it was hot drinks to warm you up on cold days. And today's answer comes from Donna Michelle Rishi. I have been topping my coffee with caramel or vanilla cold foam, then sprinkling cinnamon, nutmeg, and cocoa on top. Oh my god, so yummy. That sounds very, very fancy and quite yummy indeed. I'm out of hot chocolate. Anyway, thank you very much for your answer, Donna. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.